Today's probably gonna be a short meeting, depending on, well, it depends on how many people want to chit chat. Um, Mainly I want to talk about, well, one and a half things. One is to just mention that HDFU is on its way. We've got the release stuff in here. I think we're still putting a few things together. But yeah, so we should have HDFU out this week. So that's nice. That's got 114.4-3 in it and HDF4 4.3 and includes support for Float 16. So that's coming out. Um, so the other thing that I wanted to talk about is this came up at the last HDF5 working group meeting, our Thursday meeting. And this is something I've been kind of kicking around for a while is, we've always talked about how the next major release is going to be HDF5 2.0. And with a bunch of new things coming along, like thread safety and things like concurrency, true concurrency, where you have multiple threads in the library. I kind of want to save the HDF5 2.0 moniker for that release. That'll be a bigger release. We can make bigger changes. But in the meantime, I always thought, well, there's things that might come up that we do want to release to people and have bump the major release, but not have that be like a big change, right? And so this has finally come up, and where it came from is there's a version number inside the code that isn't public that we have to bump for complex number support. And so even though people can't see this, they will see the behavior of it. And so we do need to bump that. And so we'd like to get the complex number support out sooner rather than later. We don't want people to have to wait for HDF5 2.0. So what I want to do is plan a 1.16.0 release, which may be the 1.14.5 in place of the 1.14.5 release. Could be after, could be even in the spring. But I'd like to get it out sooner so that we can get complex number support out to people as soon as that's ready. And as a part of that, there's some other stuff that we're thinking about potentially bumping. Now, in this release, I want the upgrade path from 114 to 116 to be as easy as possible. I do not want to have people have to make a lot of code changes or anything like that. Um, but there are some semantic things that I think that we should review for this release. Things like the build system, right? Like this is a time where we can start making bigger build changes that would be disruptive in a minor release. Elena and I were just talking about the CMake documentation and CMake options and things like that. And so I do want to give that a look over. Um, Library defaults. I think that's something that we should think about having changing the library defaults so that they are um, better aligned with modern I/O systems, in particular the cloud. So I think that that's worth doing some revisions there. We have a PR in to switch to using HD off T and H5P set external. That's a minor thing. And there's potentially some other stuff that we would want to look over and change. And so we started thinking about this. I haven't had time to sit down and really go through all the issues that we have that are outstanding. A lot of what I want to focus on for the next release, whether it's major or minor, is things like OSS fuzz issues, which we still have several that are outstanding. And so there probably won't be a very large list of major features that we have to features that require a major version bump that I still want to focus on these things that we previously identified. All I did was update this 114.5 planning page in the wiki to include the 116.0 and to start listing some stuff inside of here. But yeah, I still do want to focus on things like performance and cleaning up some more CI/CD. We've been making a lot of progress on that. We do have documentation on here, so that would be like the CMake install docs. So things like that, I think, are really where we want to have a lot of our focus. I just want to alert people that we may be doing a 116 release. When the 116 release comes out, we will have no more 114 releases. I do not want to maintain multiple branches again. That was much madness and took a lot of developer time. And really, if there's not really file format changes or things like that, then I don't feel like we really have a strong need to support multiple branches of the library. So that's the thing that I wanted to put out today. That's my main thing that I wanted to get out there. I don't really have a lot of other things to talk about today. It's been kind of a slow week, which is kind of nice because you can work on some other stuff. But yeah. So
Uh,
questions?
yeah, actually, some observation and a question and
Sure.
observation. So, complex type, is my understanding, it will require some file format extension, right?
I think it's created using other stuff. So I don't think it's really a file format change.
Well, at least, and I think it
In
should be
class, it's a file format addition, let's say that way.
right
Yeah.
modification, and it's pretty small enough that I would be on the border if you need a new major release. And this is why I'm very cautious about new major release. It's just from users' perspective, meaning more people will stay with 114 because based on our history and experience, usually the first major releases they kind of they are buggy. That's why it's of course then it's up to you, but those really maintenance features, and if they can be done in 114, why bother and focus? But as I
Well,
said,
normally the reason that we have more issues arise when we switch to major version numbers, that there's usually a major new feature that dramatically changes how the library works. And so for example, 110, it was swimmer, right? So we had that among other features. For 112, it was the vol. 114, we had a lot of ECP features that went in. So there's usually bigger things that require a lot of under the hood changes, and so it's quite a bit different. In this, like, would 116.0 be significantly different under the hood than 114 at right before we created that branch? Not really,
but
right? Like
with new data types you already had some issues working with users to build on different platforms, right?
right, we anticipated that there were going to be float 16 is weird, right? Like it's a strange type. Compilers are kind of quirky in terms of like how well they support it. Jordan found that some compilers kind of lie about what their capabilities are when you query them with the build system and then go try to actually use them in practice. They're not quite there yet. So we knew that that was going to have a bunch of headaches and that, but again, but also with that feature, I mean, unless you actually use float 16, like you're not really going to see a lot of the quirks. And I feel like the same thing would be true that, if there are going to be quirks, they're going to be surrounding the complex number code and not any other part of the library.
So what
So I
about,
think it's lower
sorry,
risk. Go
yeah, I
ahead.
think it's pretty low risk. It is very localized. If there's a problem, it's only in this one really narrow area. But so it sounds
Mhm.
like you're thinking to get complex, float 16, float 8, all the other data types bundled into the 116.0.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay, that
It
makes
would
a lot.
depend, right? I think that with for example, float 8, like that could be added to 114. So if we did a 114.5 release now and then did 116, later in the fall or earlier in the spring or whatnot, we would get
Yeah,
float
sure,
8 out
sure.
in fall.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, no, I still think 116 pretty soon now is a good idea.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's really just, I mean, that the big driving force, the thing that finally like, broke the camel's back was just that it probably the best way. I mean, we talked about internally that the best way to get that out is to bump the major version. So, but again, yeah, I'm trying to keep this as minimal as possible. I don't want to have things, even with build system stuff, I'm kind of hesitant to change stuff. I mean, somebody should be able to pick up, to my mind, pick up 116 and just kind of use it if you've been using 114 and not really have any issues, unless you have something hard coded to
Right.
check for version numbers. You should just be able to change that to be 116 and move along. And that's what we're hoping. My goal is to minimize the disruption. I want people to have the easiest upgrade path to 116, and all the decisions about what we put into that release will
Yeah,
being
well, and I
aligned with
think
that.
that you've done such a good job of like nailing down the release process and getting everything smoother and more process oriented. I don't think it's going to be as bumpy for this one and the next one, and it's going to get even better. So I'm all in favor of making reasonably quick major releases.
Yeah, I do feel like, you know, with the amount of CI that we have, I can see my cat. That the amount of CI we have increases our confidence that we are going to release
Yeah.
and not break stuff. But we still get surprised by stuff, right? There's still new things, and we add more CI to cover those things.
Right.
And you know, and even like the CI that you don't necessarily see on GitHub, like just in C dash, we're trying to get more stuff set up there to test a wider variety of things.
Yeah. So
Make it more robust.
we've talked about this at the community meeting. What would you relax and develop after this? I'm angling, of course, for the C11 support, but
Let's ask,
I
let's ask Dan and Robert what they think, because they're used. It's for them. So I don't think it's big deal. But
does this make you nervous? Do you think like, oh no, and I got another version of manage, or is it like, yeah, it's not too bad?
We tend to stay with what's working for us.
Hmm.
So I'm not sure how quickly we would move on to a new version.
I think that's common for a lot of people, that people
Yeah.
tend to stay with what works. I mean, the things that I think we try to, that I point out to people when I'm trying to encourage them to update is increases in performance when, you know, especially recently we've made a bunch of changes. But then also security issues.
Yeah.
Right. That as CP issues come out. I mean, if you're, you know, behind a firewall on your own machine and stuff, maybe you don't care as much about that stuff. But for people who are potentially more exposed to integrating HDF5 into commercial software products and stuff like that,
So
we have been trying
right. We're pretty locked down here. I work all our stuff runs on servers inside of NASA's Goddard Space Flight Facility. On the other hand, they have a lot of people who do nothing but worry about security, so they might actually force us to change. That I don't think that's happened with HDF5. That certainly happened with other software.
to.
Another thing you might
One of the issues is
Dan, sorry, is the support for the ML types that will greatly ease integration with those workflows internally.
Yeah, our cloud optimized HDF5, the newer versions have improvements.
that's one of the biggest things. If you are serious about cloud optimized HDF5, then there is really, especially even H5 repec. I think a couple of months ago, someone reported some problems of all the repecs when doing netcdf4 files with the variable length data. And we fixed this bug, but it's only in 1.14 and that kind of stuff. So if you, and so as far as I know, for example, as this is now seriously looking in cloud optimized HDF5, and if they start saying, well, you don't have to be maybe the user of that data, such data, but don't produce files that are going to be really miserable in the cloud, then might be one of the you know the main reasons that maybe people upgrade. Like I worked with ISET2 mission recently, and they had, you know, they wanted to produce these files and they moved from whatever they're using to 1.14 something, and luckily for them it was very easy upgrade. They're really able to go without any problems. But those kind of things, yes. Otherwise, if you're still in a file system kind of environment, on-prem consumption and production, that kind of stuff, then I think, you know, upgrading is kind of more iffy as really a must.
Well, our we ultimately here at with the NASA stuff, we get paid to put these put the data files into the public for public out for public access, which basically winds up on I think these days it's Amazon Web Services. So it does ultimately wind up in the cloud. So there is some advantage to us to producing things that will be cloud friendly, even if it doesn't necessarily improve our performance locally.
Yeah, that's right. That's yes. You just described, yep.
Other comments, questions?
Well, the one I mentioned, can we relax to have developments goes to C11? Dan, would that terribly affect you? Any other user commentary on that?
What was the switch to C? I mean, switching to
Instead of requiring C99, haha, right? Could we maybe start requiring C11?
Oh, I'm not sure. I could if as long as GCC supports it, that's what tends to be what we use. Then
Yeah, well, I mean, 4.4.7 started supporting C11.
Okay, yeah, and we're beyond that now. Although we actually we're using it up until a couple of years ago, so we were rather behind in that respect. So I don't think that would be a problem here. I can ask more generally.
Yeah, I've always been hesitant to bump to C11. I mean, the thing that was always a problem for us with C99 was Microsoft. Was that for many years Microsoft really dragged its feet, but they've been going much faster at supporting C11. They've been much more enthusiastic. There's some optional stuff that they're not as into. I think they also maybe they mentioned maybe there's some complex number support stuff that they decided they were not going to fully implement because they'd already had their own stuff. So there's a few things that Microsoft is still quirky about that are in the optional category. So I'm kind of less worried about it. I'm more worried about people that are on legacy systems that have been around for a while that are still in production. But I would assume, I mean, if we're gonna make a change like that, and I think that very shortly after we would create the 116 branch and start releasing that, we would start getting ready for HDF5 2.0. And that would potentially be larger changes to the library. And for that sort of stuff, I feel that for the more cutting edge stuff, and we would support 116 for quite some time, then it's worth starting to bump up compiler versions and things like that so we can get modern functionality.
Yeah, but make lots of new capabilities a whole lot easier to implement.
Mm-hmm. But that's not a decision that we make lightly. I mean, we try to do the best we can to support older stuff until it doesn't make as much sense anymore. But now, even with I mean, with Microsoft and a lot of the stuff like Microsoft and Xcode and things like that, they're all on subscription services now, so they get updated routinely. So we have fewer problems with somebody buying a copy of Visual Studio and then using it for 15 years. It's more that you buy it and it has to phone home to make sure you're still allowed to use it, and when it does that, it updates. So there's fewer problems than there were in the past. It's more, I think people have older Linux systems that are on support contracts that are intended to run for a very long time. But luckily, GCC and Clang are pretty aggressive about trying to update to newer versions of the standards. The other thing that I sometimes worry about is some of the quirkier compilers that are less common but still exist, like IBM's compilers and things like that, those are still in use.
Yeah, Dane, I would just add, you can overstay your welcome on a particular version of Visual Studio. You can hang out in 2017 for quite a while before having to go to a later version. So it is possible to sort of hang back there and not move forward to the latest versions. On the subscription service makes it very easy to do that as well.
Okay.
So,
with Teams, I tried to not upgrade to new Teams for as long as possible until it really started to yell at me.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I have one follow-up question, just the last one. I think you had covered it before. What's the core VFD slowdown under your bullet item as Windows as a first-class citizen? What was going on there?
From what I understand, the memory allocator in Windows. So Malloc and Free are not native to Windows. They have their own Win32 API calls. The whole C standard library is kind of an afterthought. And so from what I understand, the way that Realec is implemented in Windows, it has very poor performance when you're trying to grow a memory buffer, that it actually, instead of trying to just kind of make it a little bit bigger and then, tell the operating system, hey, this belongs to this process now. Instead, it actually does a full copy for whatever reason. And so the performance is atrocious for doing a lot of Realecs. And this is a known thing. I've seen articles about this and stuff, and people fix it by just doing larger reallocations. So that's one of the things that I would like to do, is that we have right now, when you set up the core VFD, you set up an increment. And the default is very small, right? Like, so we're telling people to make these very tiny increments. And when you do that, you're gonna call Realec a lot, and you're gonna do a lot of calls. And so instead, I was thinking that we would have potentially an H5P call that we can add in. Then if you run that after you do the setup for the core VFD, you could give it like a fraction, right? That, like, every time you call it, it's gonna make it, this percent bigger instead of by some fixed amount, and then you'll do a smaller number of Realecs. And so I think that'll scale better. And so and there's maybe other places in the library. We've gotten a couple of performance complaints about things that seem like they might be similar, like data space increasing and stuff like that. So we have to go take a look at some of these things to see, like, and we've had some tests that are weirdly long running on Windows, and we've never had the time to sit down and really investigate that. Like, I think the iStore test would just take like 3 times longer on Windows than it did on Linux. And sometimes it's POSIX layer thing. Sometimes but I think it's more commonly it's the Realec thing. So.
Okay, thanks, got it.
And then we do have, I've talked to Werner Benger gave us his Win32 VFD a long time ago, and we made some changes to try. We tried to incorporate that into the library, but it didn't 100% pass CI. And so that's one of the things that I would like to blow the dust off of. And I've had some conversations with him. Maybe he and I can figure it out and get that, and that would be nice, because there are tweaks that you can make to how I/O happens with the Win32 VFD, with a true Win32 VFD, that you cannot with the POSIX layer, because the POSIX layer in Windows is very primitive. It's from 1997, never updated for Unicode. It has a lot of problems. So you have to use Win32 API calls to do it. Like, for example, if you want to have like sparse storage, right? Like in Linux, you can write 1 byte and then you can seek way ahead and then write another byte, and you really only write, the pages that have those 2 bytes in it, and it does a bunch of internal bookkeeping to say that this is all just blank space. In the POSIX layer in Windows, that is not true. You actually write out, like, I think it came up with zeros or garbage to the whole file, right? And then you get your pages at the end. But you can turn on that sort of sparse storage with Win32 API calls. So there's many things, and there's also the total number of files you can have open is very limited with both the POSIX and the standard I/O VFDs. And so if you want to have a lot of files open, it's easier to do that with the Win32 API.
So that might be the heavy hitter in terms of the improvements there on Windows to have that VFD. That sounds pretty significant from a performance standpoint there, and making it a true first-class citizen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of the things I wanted to do with Windows for a long time. I know that there are a lot of people, we don't hear from them as much. They tend to be smaller, they tend to be commercial, and we don't have as much contact with them as a lot of our most active partners. But I know that HDF5 is used on like a lot of benchtop instruments. And those, like when you go to your doctor's office or when you go into like a chemistry lab and look at people doing like HPLC, they have Windows machines. So that would help a lot, I think. I don't think it's that much work. I think that if somebody really sat down, you know, and had some dedicated time to really kind of dig into why it wasn't working, we could figure it out. Yeah, Windows isn't going anywhere. People keep rumoring that Windows is going to be dead, and it's never goes away. But also too, I mean, in addition to Windows, we've tried to do a better job of supporting the kind of GNU-ish, Unix-ish Windows, right? Cygwin and MinGW. I know that a lot of people, when they create their wrappers, they use MinGW to build them. And so we have a lot in CI now that we'll test to make sure that MinGW works. That's important to a lot of people. Anything else? That was great. More spirited discussion than I thought. Oh, Dan.
I had a kind of a comment. I don't know if I brought this up before, kind of going back to the HDF view that you were talking about in the beginning.
Yep.
I've encountered a very obscure problem, which the way our SAs have sort of set up a software deployment system for us. Our software lands on a kind of an obscure a home-built file system. And it looks like, for best I can tell, when you use the HDF view, it tries the underlying Java engine tries to do an mmap of I guess it's the custom runtime with a map protect equal to like map shared. And I think that is not supported by this file system, and it winds up segfaulting. And I'm not sure that the map shared is actually necessary for HDF view to work. I think of map shared as being something where you're trying to use a memory mapped disk space to communicate between processes. Is that?
I don't know enough about HDF view under the hood.
Yeah, well, I think this goes all the way down to the Java, actually.
Yeah, I mean, if you create an issue on the HDF5, the HDF view GitHub right in here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Then we'll take a look at it.
All right. Yeah, I don't even know if it's something you
can, or at least work with you to fix it.
Yeah, I mean, we have a workaround, and to be honest, I'm not sure it's something you can reproduce because it may only exist on this one file system that lacks this support for this thing. But yeah, if it's something that can be turned off in HDFU, if it's not necessary for the functioning of HDFU, then maybe it can be turned off in Java.
Yeah, I have no idea. But if you create an issue, we can get back to it.
All right.
Anything else? All right. Well, thanks everybody for coming. And if you have comments, I will create a post on the forum. Right? I did not yet, and we just have this thing here. But I will create a post that explains kind of what we're doing and why, so if people want to weigh in at any time before the 116 release, please pop in and comment. I can't know how I'm annoying everybody unless they show up and hassle us. So please don't be shy.
We will never be shy.
People are shy. I keep asking people, like, will you please complain so I know? But you have to complain well, right? You have to give me enough information to do the right thing, right? You can't just say this sucks. You gotta actually give us information, and then we'll try our best.
Yeah, but you also cannot ignore the silent complaints because people are busy, and just spend time and not knowing if it will be addressed, if it's addressed. You should be in the user's shoes sometimes to see it. I complained already several times that there is no page for tools now on our website. You cannot find documentation for tools. So I ended up, fortunately, I had installation and I knew it has help function, right? But for new user, just how do you find it now? I don't know.
Yeah, we're working on it. the to-do list is long, right?
Yeah, but
Like
there are
there's-
some, things like tools. It's major thing. It should be
Yeah.
distributed. Okay,
Okay,
thank you.
well, I will.
So when do you plan for 116? What time is it? Time frame?
So the way that we're going to plan 116, right, is I don't want to. I'll probably tentatively put it on the schedule this week. I'm still, given the things that I really care about um for 114, and I think that one of the more important things that we'll get out, besides the complex number thing, is to take a look at the library defaults. I think that it would really be a good idea to sit down and test some things out to see how we should adapt the library defaults. And so that's going to involve communication with people. It's going to require doing a bunch of testing in a variety of situations. And so the thing that makes me hesitant to commit to having a 116 release in September is I want to make sure that we get that any default changes right, because I don't want to have endlessly changing library defaults. And so I'd like for us to kind of do this one time, have a much better set of library defaults that works better with like modern high-speed SSDs and cloud storage and things like that. And so I think that would be a really, really, really useful feature. And so if we don't have enough time between now and September, which is only a couple months away, then I would want to kind of maybe push that release out to maybe like October or November if we had to have enough time. But I would really like to get a 116 release out this year. And I would like to get it out in place of the 114.5 release, so I don't have to do 2 releases, so I can just do 1. So, but we'll see. We're gonna play it by ear. I'll have a list of stuff, and we'll just keep everybody in the loop at the working group meetings and through forum posts and through this meeting. We'll let people and through all our mini talks we'll be doing.
The question I would have with defaults, which is a great thing to do, we need to think about backward-forward compatibility, kind of applications, not for the library, right? And I don't know if you have, in 2 months, you can get this information from
Exactly, right. Yeah.
Because I would say it's unrealistic, and you have to pose the right question, right? You have to think this through. Maybe it's not a problem, I don't know. It is really.
Yeah, but this is one of the things that I think it's worth. We really need to sit down and do this, and luckily we have there's much travel and talks and things like that, and the hug, and there's many venues where we can talk to people and get this process started and hassle people in the community to try things on their machines. And so, and if I have to, then we do it in the spring, right? Like, I mean, yeah, do we have to wait an extra couple of months? Yeah, 6 months. Yeah, that sucks. But if we do it in March, or if we do it in February, that's fine. Right. I'd rather delay it and get it right than hurry it up and then, now I got to change the defaults again. That's just going to be confusing. And we'll have endless support complaints where like the performance goes up and down based on like what the library defaults were. So I don't want that at all. So we want to do it right.
Performance memory, because you change some default, you will it will increase in application memory, so you have to specify all consequences. This is another task, right? Okay, thanks.
It is true. Yeah. And that's the thing that, like, I mean, we kind of, if we want people to move to 116 from 114, I mean, there's code changes, which we hope are going to be minimal to non-existent. But then, yeah, then there's, anything that we do that's subtle, right, is that's potentially something that is gonna hit applications, right? Where something like, a data set uses this much memory instead of before it's a tiny little amount. And so people who do have a workflow where they open up thousands of data sets are gonna have to have an H5P call to set it back to the original defaults. Or we could have a compiler flag that would give you the original ones, or we can have configuration files that people can use, right? There's many ways that we can try to engineer around this. But yeah, it's important. We don't want to antagonize our users. But I do think that it is a big problem that out of the box, HDF5 still thinks it's 1997. And that does not work well with modern IO. And we really need to fix that problem, because I see stuff out there where people are trying to do performance testing. And so they pick up something like ZAR out of the box and use that, and it's fine. And they use HDF5, and they're just doing crazy stuff, for us, right, who know how to use it, because they just don't know, right? They're just using it out of the box. And so we really do need to update it to.
But I can tell you that defaults are great. But now, for example, I'm helping someone. They have data organized in the way, no way they can make it performant, even with the new defaults. And you will have more and more. So educating people on data organization in HDF5 file, I think it's a bigger task, but which will help with performance than defaults, because you see applications all over the place. Like, as you said, they open and they have a chunk cache, and now what? You eat all memory and you suddenly have digress in your performance because you change default, say, to be 10 megabyte chunk cache or whatever. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yep. All right. Thanks for coming, everyone. Spirited discussion is great. And I will see you guys in another month.